Greetings, hello, welcome. So we are back for another session of the Discourses. I have a few preliminary notes. The first is you may notice that the scenery is a little bit different. I am moving north as my semester is pretty much over. So I've returned my landlord's original photograph behind me. And second preliminary note, game theory. I was intending to do that, get that done today. However, on account of my moving, part of the stuff I've already moved would be my whiteboard. So, pretty hard to do game theory without a suitable, working board to write things upon, so yes. So that will be coming next week once my move's complete and I'm reunited with my board. And my last, more serious preliminary note that I want to touch on is that, while I discuss Stoicism and while I fairly adore Stoicism and find it a very noble and helpful tool in life, I don't want you guys to think that I am a perfect Stoic, because I'm not. I like it for the precise reason that I am not a perfect Stoic. I am not a perfect Stoic by any stretch of the imagination. I try, and there are cases where I could try harder, and that is why I take to this, right? So it's not an easy task, and I just don't want people to feel like I don't know, don't idealize me too much, because I'm human and that's just how it is. So so let's dive in. So we're moving to book 2 now. We're gonna do book 2, section 4, addressed to someone who has been caught cheating on his wife. Because this, I believe, one of the topics that we touched on in the last session was on the topic of wrongdoing. And I think this is a sort of continuation of wrongdoing, which is good to bring out more, because I think we just spent the last part of the last session on wrongdoing. So let's do it. Epictetus was saying that as human beings we are born to be faithful to one another, and that whoever denies this denies their humanity. Just then, a well-known scholar entered the room, one who had been caught in adultery while in Rome. So Epictetus continued, "But what are we really doing when we throw away our innate faithfulness? To intrigue with our neighbor's wife? We are ruining and destroying. Well, what? How about the man of trust, principle, and piety that once was? And is that all? Aren't we also ruining the idea of neighborliness, friendship, and community? What positions are we putting ourselves in? How am I supposed to deal with you now? As a neighbor? A friend? Some friend? A fellow citizen? But how can a fellow citizen like you be trusted?" Right, so I think the most interesting thing that pops out there is that idea of innate, where was it? Innate faithfulness, yes, there it is. To throw away our innate faithfulness. Interesting. So I think the most reasonable way to interpret that is that likely that human relations are sort of centered upon, or at least theoretically or possibly in some situations, are centered around some sort of faithfulness, some sort of mutually dependent indebtedness to each other, or something of that nature, something that there is something which connects us and enables us to be able to live together, to be able to cooperate with each other. And in order to do that, we need to enact certain principles that enable us to do that, and we follow those in order to uphold ourselves together in some capacity. It's difficult to interpret that, or to find the right words for how to put it. But I think part of the key is that when he talks about neighborliness, friendship, and community, the idea is that in relation to this innate faithfulness, that we're only enabled to enact neighborliness, friendship, and community by virtue of sharing certain common principles or certain guiding ways of being that prevent us from treading on each other in a way that would hurt someone else or that would hurt us, and that by upholding these principles and acting in accordance with them, we avoid hurting others. And so in that avoidance of hurting others, we strengthen the notions of our sort of innate faithfulness to each other, our care for others, which I think really would be just an extension of our desire to be not treaded upon ourselves. It's a mutual ideology of non-treading. I will not tread on you, and therefore you will not tread on me, and that is therefore how we enact this collective being together in which we're able to enjoy each other's presence and be together without, harsh feelings and so on. But, so I think, so that's the first part, I think. And the second part, though, so when he's talking about this, a scholar who was caught in adultery while in Rome, and then he says, well, what have you done by doing that? You've ruined and you've destroyed. You've sacrificed yourself. You're no longer a person of trust. You're no longer a person of principle. You're no longer a person of piety. And therefore, you've hurt yourself first most. That's the first thing that's being conveyed here, is that in your act, and in your act being found out, what you've done is you've put yourself in a position where you're no longer this sort of image of goodness, or you're no longer this image or being of principle or of respect or of trust and community. You've violated in some capacity these values which we collectively value, and in so doing, you've made yourself less of a person, or less in line with the idea of the goodness of a person which we collectively abide by or idealize. And not only that, so not only have you tarnished yourself, you've ruined the person you are in some capacity by our standards of what goodness is. You've also jeopardized yourself in relation to others. So that is when he says, how am I supposed to deal with you now? As a neighbor? A friend? Some friend? A fellow citizen? But how can a fellow citizen like you be trusted? So the idea is that not only have you wronged yourself, you've tarnished who you are, but you've tarnished everyone else's perception of who you are through your wrongdoing, that I can no longer trust you in the same capacity that I otherwise could have, because you have taken it upon yourself by your own free will and volition to violate a norm, or to violate a common value that we all share. So therefore, you have made yourself less. So I think, so he's talking about cheating here, but cheating as an example for any possible wrongdoing. So the same analysis, the same conclusions could be drawn about anything which violates our sense of morality in some capacity, I believe. But let's continue. Look, if you were born a bowl so leaky that you were good for nothing more, you would be tossed in the rubbish dump, and no one would take the trouble to pick you out. What are we going to do with a human who can't fill the most basic human role? Fine, you can't function as a friend. How would you do as a slave? Who would have any confidence in you, though, even in that capacity? So how would you like to be tossed in the rubbish too, like a leaky bowl? Dung. So the idea there, it's the same. It's that if you become a thing so cracked as to not be able to fulfill your basic function as a human being, in this case in relation to others and in relation to community and friendship and bonds and so on. So if you violate the underlying principles that give rise to the possibility of a friendship, community, and so on, you are the equivalent to a thing, to a bowl with cracks in it, which can no longer serve its purpose. And what we do with things, what people do with things that no longer serve their purpose, is throw them out. Get rid of them, right? Because what does a cracked bowl have to do to serve me? Perhaps it might be able to fill something, perhaps some cereal without milk, but if a common thing about cereal is the milk, then the bowl is pointless because it can't do the trick. So the idea is that not only do you wrong yourself and you wrong others, so you're a person now who's not a trustworthy person, and people will no longer have any trust on you. What this will lead to is you being thrown out completely. That you voided yourself by the violation of such things, by the violation of moral value. You no longer become a thing with use. You become like dung. So that's pretty easily understandable. I mean, that's not complex, but just, I think, the nature of the dynamics of wrongdoing. So that, I guess the point is that one should be aware that in such an act, that these acts will inevitably lead to really three different things, to three different likely outcomes if found out, and each of which I think provides its own reason for avoidance. And I think the most important one is what he started with, which is namely that in such a wrongdoing, what you're really doing is ruining the person you are. You've hurt first most yourself, right? Because the Stoic would say that, well, to others, they'll just accept the circumstance. Just, well, you're a shit person now, so, or you've committed wrong, and therefore that's just how it is. So I'm going to leave you now. So you've wronged yourself, you've wronged your community, and in turn you've made yourself obsolete to the community. You no longer serve a purpose in relation to whatever person or community you've wronged. So you've dug your grave and you will die in it. And that's that. So the next. Then you were heard to say, "No one gives me any respect as a man of letters." That's because you're a vile and worthless human being. It's as if wasps were to protest that they get no respect. Everyone runs away from them. Some people will even swat them, given the chance. Your prick is such as to infect everyone you sting with heartache and aggravation. What would you have us to do with you? There isn't any place you will fit. So again, in line with that, the person who commits wrongdoing is similar to a wasp. It's similar to an entity which buzzes around irritating and burning people, stinging people, and then protesting that they've done nothing wrong, or that they still deserve respect, or that they can be redeemed. And Epictetus' point is that this is absurd. You are the one who stung, and now you come back to protest. Or if such a person were to come back to protest, the point would be that hope is lost, that you, by virtue of your free will and free choice, have chosen to sting, and you will now suffer the consequences of having stung, which is necessarily to be swatted away or killed. Maybe not killed, but if you were a wasp, perhaps. So it's very clear. The point is that those who commit wrongdoing, they no longer serve a place. And I think we see that probably embodied in our, prison systems and whatnot. It's a long stretching idea, a long stretching, like over the course of time, very ingrained in human beings, that we do have some sort of sense of innate faithfulness to principles which enable communities to function and personal relationships and interpersonal relationships to function. And that to violate that faithfulness, that supposed innate faithfulness, is such an injustice that you may lose your place. I mean, maybe we'll save some discussion about that, the problems, for after. So there's just one more little section here. Look, try this instead. When the judge, like the host at a private party, has assigned them, be satisfied to claim your own share. Don't be a glutton and steal someone else's. But I'm a scholar who understands Archidemus. You can understand Archidemus and still be an adulterer and a cheater, a wolf or an ape rather than a human being. What's to stop you? So the point there is that to think of, I suppose, life, the private party, in which you're assigned a certain lot, whether you earn that lot or you come by that lot or whatever lot you come by, you have your own lot. You have those things which are allocated to you. And therefore, to go above what's allotted to you and to steal someone else or to violate a principle in such a way as to gather more than what is your fair share is to be a glutton in some capacity. And there is no way around it. It is simply what it is. And the point here, when he says, quoting someone who says that they understand some scholar, the point, he says, it doesn't matter. So the idea there is that it doesn't matter how learned a person you are, what wealth, whatever you think you have that makes you entitled to more than what is morally your own, you are wrong. You can still be a scholar and be an adulterer and a cheater, a wolf or an ape, rather than a human being. That's his point there. So, I think the problem with this analysis, or with this position expounded on by Epictetus here about wrongdoing, is that it's very crack of the whip. Like, it's very like, you have wronged, therefore you have wronged yourself, you have wronged the other, and you have wronged the overall community of which you are a part. And when he talks about the wasp analogy, is the person who wrongs is a wasp who goes around stinging, and then talks about the absurdity if that wasp were to protest people smacking it away or telling it to get lost or whatever, that would be absurd because the wasp deserves it. So I think the problem here is how do we include redemption into Stoicism? Is there, I cannot recall a specific passage of redemption in here, or how we enact or understand how redemption is possible within the doctrine of Stoicism. Because to me it's not clear at this point, but I feel that it needs to be, because I don't think that it is always that simple. Like, perhaps it is that simple after you're so learned, but I feel that one needs to make, and this is just my opinion, that one needs to make mistakes. One will do wrong in their life, and they will, hopefully, the point to learn from that wrong. But I feel that wrongdoing is sometimes a very essential feature of becoming a truly moral person, because yes, you've wronged, but you've also had the opportunity to live with the consequences of your wrong, to truly understand the consequences of what you have done, how you have impacted others, and how you have impacted yourself, and then grow from it. So, from my perspective, the person who's never done wrong, if such a person exists, is obviously, the perfect spectacle of moral virtue. Well, I don't know, actually. I don't know if that's the case. Because for the person who's never committed a wrong to be the perfect spectacle of moral virtue, is it truly possible for them to understand the full depths of, or the full, all of the consequences that come from wrongdoing? Is it possible for them to truly understand the impact without having ever lived it in some capacity? I mean, I guess that's possible. I mean, you could make the case, like, do you need to kill someone to know it's wrong? No, probably not, because you can equate it with yourself. But I think that is itself an understanding of how you'd be affected, or of the real consequences of it. I'm not sure. Perhaps one doesn't have to experience it, but I do fully believe that one is a better person having done wrong and learned to be better. I think it is something fundamentally different than the person who never did anything. Because, I don't know, to me, the person who's done wrong has had a greater struggle, and they have perhaps a greater appreciation for the morals they've come by, or for their understanding that's developed. I mean, I'm not sure. What do you guys think? How do we fit redemption into this? Is redemption ever fully possible? Can people be redeemed? Do we need to fit redemption into this? Is the person who redeems themselves, do they have a stronger moral character than the person who's never wronged because of their understanding and because of the struggle they've gone through to get to that point? I don't know. Contemplate those questions. Provide me an answer if you wish.